If you enjoy my videos, please check out my website at creationsciencefiction.com, where you'll find articles on creationism, science, and my blog. If you really enjoy what I'm doing, please consider becoming a contributor at the link in the video description. In this video, we're going to take another look at what old Earth creationists like Hugh Ross teach about Neanderthals and human origins.
Okay, the sound is sounding good. All right, great. Okay, well, this is the last in the 6-week series on our Introduction to Science and Faith, and I'll be speaking on human origins. And of the 6 talks, I'm going to be addressing the most controversial material in this talk. I think you'll understand why this is such a controversial area.
Now, some people had said that I was addressing Hugh Ross's old material in previous videos, so I just want to stress that this was recorded on February 17th, 2019.
Let me begin by defining terms, because this is what draws a lot of confusion in the origin of humanity debate. Did we come from a caveman or Cro-Magnon? Who are the hominids, and what about Homo sapiens? Well, I'd be cautious about using the term cavemen because there are humans that live in caves. Matter of fact, I think there's some rather sophisticated gentlemen in America today that build special caves in their homes and they're loaded up with certain equipment. So you might be justified in referring to someone who's really quite technologically endowed as a caveman. And the word Cro-Magnon has disappeared from the scientific literature for the simple reason we recognize that Cro-Magnons are fully modern in their humanity. So we're all Cro-Magnons. There's no difference between a Cro-Magnon and a Homo sapiens sapiens.
I'm not sure why he even put cavemen in there unless it was just a setup for that joke because, no scientist ever used the term caveman. Cro-Magnon has always been considered Homo sapiens since day one. They call them Cro-Magnon because of the region that they were found in. It was never a species designation. Young Earth and old Earth creationists both make this mistake a lot.
Now the term hominids refers to any mammal that has, say, a body size bigger than 3 feet tall, that is capable of bipedal capability.
He stuck his head up at first, and then he stood up fully, and then he started to walk.
There it is! There it is!
This sighting caught on camera July 19th. The bear ambling down a residential street in suburban Oak Ridge, New Jersey.
That is a bipedal bear.
2 weeks later, there he goes again, just 2 doors down.
He's looking at me.
Okay, well, hominids are actually primates that are members of the family Hominidae. They're not any mammal that's over 3 feet tall that sometimes walks on 2 feet.
And so another term would be a bipedal primate. But for example, if you've got a chimpanzee who's got a broken arm, that chimpanzee becomes bipedal. The chimpanzee prefers not to walk on 2 legs, but can walk on 2 legs. And there are bears that can walk on 2 legs. But however,
there are anatomical differences between facultative and obligate bipeds. Facultative bipeds walk upright occasionally, where obligate bipeds do so habitually.
The hominids are referring to creatures that have some facility on walking on 2 legs, some better than others. And the term Homo sapiens does not refer to us. We're a subcategory of the Homo sapiens. So the Homo sapiens actually refers to several different bipedal primate species. And say, well, what do they call modern humans? We're referred to as Homo sapiens sapiens. That's human beings. So again, don't use the term Homo sapiens for modern humans. We're Homo sapiens sapiens. In other words, we think twice.
I've been over this before, but no one really calls Homo sapiens sapiens anymore. But if he's going to teach that, he needs to teach that the same people who do would also teach that Neanderthals are Homo sapiens neanderthalensis.
Okay. Now, The research findings concerning these bipedal primates is that in every case, the non-human bipedal primate populations are small and local. Now, if the populations are small and local, that immediately limits the possibility of them being able to evolve in any significant way. The probability of getting evolutionary change is proportional to the population size and also the habitat size. So in both cases, that's quite limited.
Well, while individual populations of, say, Neanderthals might have been small, they were part of a much larger population that inhabited Europe and Western Asia. And at the same time, Homo sapiens inhabited all of Africa.
They were using tools, but what we notice is the tool use is simple. In other words, we're talking single rocks or a piece of wood. It's not like what we humans do where we join a piece of wood to a rock with some sinews to make it a rather sophisticated tool. The tools in all cases of non-human bipedal primates are simple, and for what it's worth, chimpanzees also use simple tools. And so they'll use rocks, for example, to crack open nuts that can't be cracked open in any other way.
Now remember, he's including Neanderthals with these non-human primates, and he couldn't be more wrong. The evidence shows that Neanderthals were making glue to attach axe heads and spear heads before we were.
In all cases, the bipedal primates' tool use is not as sophisticated as what we see from ravens and crows. So ravens and crows have a more sophisticated tool use than we see there.
Okay, this is pretty interesting, watching this crow use a tool to get another tool in order to get a treat. But, Neanderthals could have figured that out too, I'm sure. I mean, they were making sophisticated tools, not like he claims. Heck, even the chimpanzees use just as sophisticated methods to get termites out of mounds.
In terms of the time span, the earliest existed 6.5 million years ago. The most recent went extinct about 33,000 years ago. And in every single case, we're not able to observe technological advance in their tool use.
Flat out wrong again. This is an early Oldowan-style tool, like the ones discovered by the Leakeys, that date to at least 2.5 million years old in Africa. We see the development of the hand axe, followed by projectile points, and all of this happened with what he's calling non-human primates, which were actually early hominins, but not modern Homo sapiens.
To give you an example, Neanderthals have been around here on planet Earth for about 120,000 years, but we see no advance in their tool technology over that 120,000 years. They've been here a lot longer than we humans have, and yet we don't see any advance in their technology.
Modern paleoanthropologists will put the dawn of Neanderthals at around 400,000 years ago and their demise at 35 to 40,000 years ago. They were around much longer than what he's saying, and they also had many technology advances during that time.
Now, something else we observe about these bipedal primates is that the fossil record is not a tree. Rather, it looks like a hedge. And what I mean by that, instead of seeing some progressive development in the morphology and the genetics, we see that it bounces around. So the prediction was that if we indeed have evolved from a common ancestor with the chimpanzees and the Neanderthals, we're going to see a progressive building up of the brain size and a progressive building up of bipedal capability. But instead what we see in about a dozen different bipedal primate fossils or species that have been discovered so far is that you'll see the brain size go up, then it drops down, it goes up and drops down.
We do know there were many different types of hominids around at the same time, just like there are now. But we also see a clear increase in brain size on the road to hominins that ended up becoming human.
Also, the bipedal capability will, instead of going smoothly up, it jumps up and down.
I don't know where he's getting this information. It'd be nice if he were showing it on slides. Evidence for bipedalism in hominids goes back 7 million years. We also see evidence for obligate bipedalism in Lucy species at 3.5 million years ago.
It is such that what you see in the scientific literature is with the discovery of every new bipedal primate species, it throws the evolutionary model into greater chaos rather than less chaos. So the hope was, as we discover these, it would fit the tree model, and actually what we're discovering is, in each case, it's showing that the tree model is incorrect. New finds add chaos to the naturalistic models. Now, in terms of who is Homo sapiens, we're not referring to a human species. There's a species called Homo sapiens idaltu, and very roughly, it's a tropical Neanderthal type. It's a creature similar to the Neanderthal, but with a morphology designed to live in a warm climate rather than a cold climate. Lived about 80,000 to 250,000 years ago, shows no evidence for symbolic capability. Incidentally, that's true of all the non-human bipedal primates. We see no evidence for symbolic capability, no evidence for worship, and no technological advance.
While some paleoanthropologists call early Homo sapiens, like Homo sapiens idaltu, a separate subspecies, it shows absolutely no Neanderthal traits at all. Although they did have large brow ridges, it wasn't a continuous brow ridge over the nose like we see with Neanderthals. They had no large occipital bun at the back of the skull. Their skull was shaped just like modern humans. And from the neck down, there was nothing Neanderthal about them at all. He likes to mention we don't see evidence of art and religion with Neanderthals, but the truth is we see as much evidence of art and religion with Neanderthals as we did with modern humans or Homo sapiens alive at the same time.
Now, the one that's probably gotten the most attention and where we have the greatest amount of data are the Neanderthals. We actually today have more than 20 complete skeletons of Neanderthals. Mitochondrial DNA has been recovered from more than 20 different specimens. But what we notice is we can't measure any evolution in the DNA. In other words, the oldest DNA doesn't look any different from the more recent DNA.
Actually, the oldest DNA at the dawn of Neanderthals shows that it is much different than the more recent Neanderthal DNA, and the most recent Neanderthal DNA from Europe shows they were being replaced by populations from Asia.
And if evolution is going on, we would expect to find that there's some progression, some change in a particular direction of the DNA, and we're not seeing that. The DNA is distinct relative to human DNA. Now, to be clear, Neanderthal DNA, the part that we can only measure about 2/3 of the genome of the Neanderthal. And incidentally, it's the only one where we got DNA.
No, Neanderthals are not the only ones where we have DNA. You know, this is 2019, and we've known about Denisovan DNA for years now.
DNA corrupts over time. But Neanderthals are sufficiently recent that the corruption is not so severe. But as it is, we've only got about 2/3 of genome. But if we compare that 2/3 with the relative 2/3 in the human genome, it's about 99% the same. Now, before you get too disturbed by that, your DNA is also 26% identical to daffodil DNA.
You watch, some Kent Hovind follower is going to take that as he's trying to say that we evolved from daffodils.
We see no symbolic capability for the Neanderthals. They were not doing mathematics or writing books. They evidently had no capability of recognizing symbols or communicating. No evidence that they were worshiping.
If I sound like a broken record, it's only because he keeps repeating the same points. There's also no evidence that early Homo sapiens was doing any of those things while Neanderthals were alive either.
What you'll see in the scientific literature, however, they'll say, well, we found this skeleton of a Neanderthal that appears to have been buried, and 20 feet away we see pollen from flowers. That means they must have had a burial ceremony.
I'll agree that pollen from flowers isn't good evidence, but there are other evidences that Neanderthals buried their dead in ceremonial style.
Mourning is not unique to human beings. It's a property of the emotion that we have, but we shouldn't confuse this evidence that they mourn the passing of a member of the community as some kind of spiritual expression. And the case of the Neanderthals already mentioned, no technological advance.
Well, he can keep repeating that all he wants, but it won't make it true. In fact, there's evidence that early humans borrowed technology from Neanderthals when they got to Europe. That's pretty much the end of the part of the lecture on Neanderthals, but let's take a look at one of the questions from the audience before we go.
Hugh, I got the mic. Hugh, I got the mic over here. He's got to wait his turn. A quick question. Speaking of the last 60 years, science for the last 60 years have been trying to find the missing link between humans and these bipedal primates. And various candidates I know in the past have been said, oh, we found it. And then once they look at it more closely, they say, well, maybe that's not it. Could you tell us what the current status of the scientific community is? There is no missing link. Is that the correct interpretation? I mean, Neanderthal was that went away, somebody else came in, and that's gone. Am I correct? Or what is the status of the current view of the missing link?
Okay, the current view of the missing link is they're avoiding that term. Because
that's because they told me the more they dig, they would find it. The more we dig, we haven't found it.
well, what the problem is what I mentioned earlier, is that rather than these new discoveries giving support to the idea that we evolved kind of along a tree of life pathway, that's not what the data is showing us. We're not seeing a progression of greater and greater cranial capacity with greater and greater frontal lobe capacity. We're seeing that it basically goes up and down and jumps. Likewise, our bipedal capability. I mean, what really threw it into chaos was the discovery of Homo florensis. That's the most recent of the bipedal primate finds that have been discovered. Homo florensis stands about 3 feet high and has a brain capacity that's equivalent to that of a chimpanzee, 4 times smaller than the human brain capacity. So that really threw things into chaos. It's like, this is the most recent find, but it's got a very small brain capacity, and it's only 3 feet tall, and its bipedal capability is more primitive than that of the Neanderthals. And that's just one of many examples. And so, yes, how they respond is basically stop using the term.
Okay, this lecture is 2019. Homo floresiensis was discovered in 2003. It isn't even close to being the most recent find in human evolution. Recent studies show that it was probably an offshoot from something like Homo habilis that left Africa over 1 million years ago and ended up in Indonesia. Since floresiensis was found in 2003, there's been many new discoveries, including Ardipithecus, Australopithecus sediba, and probably the most famous one would be Homo naledi. What is very clear here is that Hugh Ross is not up to speed on modern human origins research. His lectures haven't changed much in at least 10 years, and he's still wrong about our Neanderthal cousins.